Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here with Aaron van Zyl, and tonight we're talking about, or shining a light on something on the southern tip of Africa specifically, and that is the Western Cape. Some big news coming from there over the past weekend. There was an independence march there, or a march in support of Cape independence, the broader cause. It wasn't just one organization, it was a broad spectrum of organizations that were present there, and there seems to have been a very nice turnout there. So to join me tonight to do a review of the march and the implications of it is Lucas van Vuuren, he was on the ground there, he was present. He's just going to be telling us from his first person perspective what he saw in regards to the type of vibe that was there, what the attendance was like, the type of people we talked to, and then also we're talking about Robert Duigan, a regular guest on this channel, and he's going to be talking about the bigger picture in regards to what the implications are for the future, and maybe put in some analysis there in regards to where this movement might go and what the current status is of the Cape independence movement. So welcome to the show, guys. I'll leave it to Lucas can introduce, or not introduce himself, but can have the first word here, and then Robert.
Yeah, so the march was for me definitely the best, like, almost Christmas present that I could hope for. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better like mix of people, a better turnout, a better like atmosphere, and I think one of the things that made the day so great was actually the marching band music. I mean, that was something that you don't see in other protests or marches in South Africa. And it was upbeat, it was uplifting, everyone had a good like energy about it. And just the pure fact that all these like disparate groups could come together for the day and make it a success in like literally quite a hot Stellenbosch day was just amazing. It was very, very like electric.
And before you jump in, Rob, Lucas, you are originally from the Western Cape, or what is your emotional or loyalist investment in the cause of the Cape independence?
Yeah, it's quite a long story, but yeah, very close, like tied to the Western Cape. Spent so much of my life coming here, a lot of good vacations, a lot of family in the Western Cape, and but I'm studying in Pretoria now, so hopefully at the end of next year when I finish, I'll apply and I'll get placed somewhere around here, and I'll be back in the valley.
Robert, in terms of you were watching from afar, quite far in terms of across the ocean, but from your observations and what you could see from this march, what were some of your main takeaways?
Well, it was, I mean, the powers that be obviously limited the crowd size by fiat, so you're only allowed to have a certain number of people. What I noticed is you got commentators chipping in to say, "Ha! Not so many people showed up." Of course, which for me it's perverse. It's sort of like, well, the fact that the government deliberately contained the number of people who could show up. Oh, that's evidence there's not much support for it. Okay, whatever. But the interesting thing was it disproportionate to the amount of people there was an enormous amount of energy from everyone. And there was a very sort of wholesome vibe. It didn't have any of the sort of seriousness or mean-spiritedness with which Cape independence is often characterized by a lot of commentators. So there's that. And so, you know, from what's his name? Gary Kukamud made one of those remarks about the thing being sort of like, no one's really supporting it. But I think one of the more interesting things to point out from it was actually Peter Murray, because the two things that stand out for me was the input of Peter Murray and the input of Jack Miller. So now Jack Miller is he's finally seen sort of something come out of something he's been watching boil since '93. Since his father set this up in '93, and he's been dragging this on since 2007. So I think for him, it's this is a big moment for him. But for the people watching, I think Peter Marais had the most impact because he gave an incredibly impressive and charismatic speech, which brought out elements of intertwined Cape white and coloured history, mentioning everything from the Battle of Blood River to the Griqua republics to, you know, tying all of these great sort of moments in history, Great Track, you know, everything together as both coloured and white, sort of. And so there was a lot of pressure there, and I think it sort of irked Phil a little bit, because Phil is aiming for he's sort of very international facing, and so he presses this sort of very, very identity free civic nationalism stuff. Never touches on not never, but is very leery of touching on the cultural distinctions between the Cape and the rest of the country. And so we were on a stream yesterday, and he felt the need to distance himself from these things, which I understand. He has to maintain a face for the extremely sensitive and hypercritical international facing audience. And of course, you know, he can't represent everyone in the movement. So I think it shows very much how heterogeneous the Cape independence movement is.
But I think that's not a bad thing. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, especially from, let's take the happenings at Senegal as an example. There was a lot of talk about unity is important. We need one leader. We need to all be united under one banner, one movement. But for me, from my perspective and my understanding of history, it's much better to have a dynamic collection of leaders, people that are leaders in their own field, coming together as a team. There's a sense of unity. But there shouldn't be one General De La Rey that's leading the entire movement. It's much better to have these types of different leaders. For example, as you mentioned with Phil, that has a more of an outward look in terms of his perspective. But then you also have leaders in this regard in terms of like Lucas, who is an activist, but doing it in his own personal capacity. You also have leaders in regards to Jack Miller, who's doing it from his party politics perspective, which is radically different from Phil's approach, for example. So I think that's actually quite integral to this movement, is that you have these different sets of expertise, these different backgrounds, these different types of leaders that can unite behind a cause, but not so united that they just become one homogenous mass that's being led by one shepherd. Because then all you need is to capture that shepherd, or to compromise that shepherd, or neutralize him, and then the entire movement is absolutely gone.
Yeah, I think aside from that, you've also got the other thing to bear in mind, which is that unlike the rest of the country, that's not fair, but let's just put it this way: the Cape is far more culturally heterogeneous than the rest of the country. It's far more diverse, religiously, ethnically, culturally, and so on. So there's the differences. The differences are going to end up being accounted for in the movement, and from what I gather, there are efforts being made to reach out to Al Jamaa, because, you know, we have a big Muslim contingent in the Cape. And once you have these elements sort of coming together, you're going to start seeing a shift as well. I noticed that the Cape Coloured Congress was absent. I don't know what you heard on the ground there, because I'm sure there were comments about that, Lucas.
Well, I didn't see like much talk about the Cape Coloured Congress, but there was a group called the Breinbemagtigingsbeweging. But the CCC are supportive of the movement, and they want independence as well. And as far as I know, they're also going to contest next year's elections on an independence ticket.
Yes, but I always think I think they don't seem to play well with others. Let's put it that way. And there's a strong historical connection between the ANC and Fadil Adams, although as I understand it, they're not friendly anymore. But you can hear it. You can hear it in the sort of comments he makes about economic policy and racial relations. That, in his own way, it's sort of an ANC of the Cape in some ways, and so it doesn't gel with the kind of liberal and conservative features that you see arising out of the Cape independence movement.
But talking about who was present there, Lucas, you being present at the march, did you run into any interesting people that fans of the show might know as well?
Yeah, that was actually, it was very cool. I didn't go into the day really thinking about interesting people I would meet, but actually, yeah, like Joey Media was there, Clipcorp was there. I met Belleville Pitt, actually. Like, that was very interesting. I didn't know it was him at first, but yeah, what a lekker. Like, really, yeah, so 20 over there. And I met a few other friends that I made like in between, while like sort of campaigning around the Cape. There's a few investment managers from Belleville that were there. And then it was really, really nice. Unati G and Marco Alpaca, like they were there as well. So I had such a great time, such a good like energy. Ross Lamberti and his friends were there as well. So you could really say that like people from all walks of life, from like young people and students to older, like well-established, successful people. People came from far as well. I mean, from Langban in Cape Town, Somerset West. It was really like, in that way, I can say it was stunning.
And that's the thing, and I think this is very important when it comes to these types of marches, or more like real-world activism. Is that, and this is also a theme that's coming to the fore with these Stop the Steal marches in America regarding their election, is that one of the big values of these types of physical marches and this type of real-world activism is the networking that comes with it. The people that you meet there, the types of contacts that you meet there, the interesting conversations that I had there. I mean, this is something that not many people talk about. People talk about the attendance numbers, they talk about what was the core message of the march, but something that I think is a little bit under the radar is the connections that are made, and that's exactly what you're talking about here. The types of new people that you meet, and also the people that you maybe only met online that you now have met in person. So there's already a stronger relationship there, and you're definitely going to stay in contact.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Networking, especially with this, is very important because every person has their own. The same with the different groups. Like every person has their own target market of people they appeal to and of friends and interests they share. And I mean, everyone brings a few more friends and a few more contacts into this thing. So I definitely agree with that. Like there is the argument to be made that as this goes on, more and more people are going to be mini celebrities in the independence thing and bringing like more and more people to it. But I think we should stay away from having like a strongman elected or unelected strongman leader. I mean, that's definitely not the way to go. But in terms of the different groups as well, that is something I like about it. Some people hate it because it seems like, why isn't everyone working together? Why is there all these different groups pursuing independence? But that's just the fact of life. Like, Cape Colored Congress are going to appeal to people who I can't necessarily appeal to. Vryheids Front is bringing in people that the Cape Party won't appeal to. And together, like all of these people, bringing people under the mantle of the independence movement, that's at the end the most important thing. We need thought and awareness, and having it in this diverse way is actually, I think, the fastest, most efficient way to do it as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things about this as well is that it actually, this sort of like sort of collection of little micro coalitions, that actually is a better way to reflect the political landscape in South Africa. You tend in South Africa largely, I think, because of the way that politics has been done in Pretoria through most of the 20th century. And now as well, you've had you have like one party with one ethnic base that sort of consolidates everything to itself and tries to homogenize all government styles and all communication policies and everything. And it's not really a good way of reflecting reflecting how things look on the ground. Yeah, I'd agree with Russell McLaren, and I'd go further. I'd say it's actually very good. I strongly approve of the heterogeneous approach, and you'll notice you start to get these sort of like shifting coalitions building towards independence. Although I suspect that if we do get independence in the Cape, it will still be quite dominated by the Democratic Alliance, who they have. The thing about the Democratic Alliance is that they have an established financial base. They have ties to various permanent institutions. And I know people don't like to talk about it very much, but I think that it's probably significant. It's difficult to tell what it means, but the high level of Freemason membership in the DA has got to count for something. And they have very strong ties to the United Nations groups. And I mean, I know that a lot of their sort of big policy writers like to borrow things from the United Nations and write policies to agree with the Sustainable Development Goals. And so I think that should we get independence, you're going to have the political spectrum is going to be defined by the DA as a sort of quasi-authoritarian globalist sort of party versus a more sort of heterogeneous populist conservative coalition in opposition to it. That's what I would see emerging as a new paradigm.
Talking about the DA, Lucas, and it's not a problem if you don't have an answer here, but did you see any type of acknowledgement from anyone connected to the DA of the march, or any type of comment or any type of presence there at the march linking to the DA?
Yeah. If you ask me this from there, I haven't seen any DA person tweet about it or talk to me, or like none at all. It hasn't been acknowledged. The mayor, I think they did receive the memorandum that we took to them. So I mean, the DA does know about this. They did accept it. Whether they choose to reply on this or not is still up in the air. I mean, they had it on Saturday, so like this, it's only been a few days since then. But I'm really keen to see if they do reply, and if they do, what they're going to say. Because in a way, this isn't like a threat, but it's on the table now. And if they refuse to acknowledge it after having had all these people show up and the whole of this whole Stellenbosch having like heard our ruckus and seen our flags, I mean, it's going to be on the table. Do they support it or not? And are they going to stand against what quite a substantial number of their voters are support of? That's yet to be seen.
I think one of the other things that's neglected in this is the DA has been pursuing a localization policy for some time. And while John Steenhuisen and others have only started to make comment very recently, yep, that's what I was saying. So while they've only been making sort of noises about regionalization recently and been purging the sort of progressive racial discriminationist people from the party, now they've actually been one thing about Alan Winde going on about the COVID policy is that he immediately announced that the day after they signed the deal with the tech companies to build their campus in Cape Town and have what's it called, cables laid and all this kind of stuff. So I think that deals with sort of transatlantic oligarchs will naturally cause them to extend their preferred policies to you. And I think that might have been the deal. But the DA have been looking at regional autonomy policies for some time. You can look at the construction of desalination plants, the construction of local power grid options. the attempts to build local police and security measures, which I've got a couple of interviews from with J.P. Smith, which outline them. And there's a big reason for that. I mean, the ANC is openly hostile to any form of sound governance and have been going out of their way to destroy pretty much everything at any cost to people's livelihoods and lives. And so, there's very little to add to that. But I think the reason that they're tolerating the Cape Independence movement is they're happy to have Cape Independence about, because it sort of it works as a bargaining anchor. And so I think they're actually hoping. I think that because you notice they're completely quiet on this. They used to criticize you guys like a year ago or whatever, but they've been completely quiet. They don't interfere and they don't make comment. And it's the same thing that they're doing.
I remember Alan Windy saying like that Cape Independence is completely off the table. It's not even an option.
Well, of course they're saying that, but I think what they want to do is they want to give you room to grow at the moment, because you're going to make because with Cape Independence you create a bargaining chip, and if it gets really popular, what you can say, you can have a referendum. You can win the referendum, and they can still say, but we're going to settle for regional autonomy. Which, of course, is just a holding pattern until the province is completely destroyed within a generation. But, fun while it lasts. Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, look, I'm naturally quite a pessimistic fellow. I mean, that doesn't mean I don't promote a positive attitude towards things. It just means that I think that things are often quite bad. And I think the situation people have to sort of acknowledge is that while Cape Independence is quite likely existentially necessary, it is also going to cost a lot in terms of, economic damage. It's good, political violence, sabotage from Pretoria.
Robert, I find it very interesting your use of the metaphorical Pretoria. But yeah, I mean, these are things that people need to take into account.
Pretoria's been sabotaging the Cape for a very long time. I mean, you look at when they tried to introduce environmental policies during apartheid, and what they did is they'd go in and bribe local councillors to throw up high-rise buildings on protected land. So I think it's something. Maybe it's something about the union buildings that sort of seduces whoever's sitting in them to get into evil shenanigans. But
I've to ask the question: is it the union buildings that turn you into these types of people, or do the union buildings attract them like a satellite tower, like sending out a signal?
Isn't that the question?
Yeah, but anyway, for me, you touched on this, Robert, this pessimism or more cynicism around these types of matters. But I don't think it's unproductive. I don't take the stance that everyone needs to be completely positive, back it at all costs. We don't need to talk about the negative details now. We will figure it out. We just need Cape Independence now. I think specifically now it is time to really get the drudgery out of the way, get the real big questions out of the way. One of the big questions will be, how will and I'm not asking this question to get an answer from you now, but how will an independent Cape deal with having an openly hostile, very strong economy and nation next to it? That pretty much, it's in comparison to the Western Cape, it's still going to be a very big nation. It's still going to be and I don't think it's going to be a collapsed nation. It's going to be a nation with a pretty big army, even though dysfunctional in many regards. It's going to still be a big player. It's not going to be Somalia. Yeah. So these are the types of questions that need to be answered. And I think I don't think you need to be pessimistic on an issue. You just need to be optimistically realistic about it.
Yeah, sorry. I'm very. You know me. I'm very pernickety about what words mean. So no, look. If you want to talk about sort of Cape Independence, living in that sort of political environment, it's We actually already live in a hostile world full of people who actively intervene to destroy our political independence, and we have for a very long time. The whole history of South Africa is a battle between regional, national, and international forces who have divergent interests, and always, I say always, but quite often by sinister and morally dubious means. And I think today is no different, and tomorrow will not be an exception either. Living next to Azania will consolidate. It will consolidate Cape nationalism for sure. It'll introduce security problems that will. Look, this is already, if we get there. There are a lot of obstacles in the way. I think that while everyone, but I would really stress to everyone that while Cape independence is almost impossible, it's also existentially necessary. And if you don't achieve it, then you are going to watch South Africa continue to degenerate until the point at which normal human life is all but impossible. Because it is in the interests of international capital for it to be so. It is profitable to international capital for South Africa to be destroyed, as everyone can see by witnessing what rich people get involved with. You can see there are a large number of people from various countries who invest in the EFF, for example. Who invest in land rights movements. Now, why are billionaires investing in land rights movements? Because they depress the property price. It's the same reason the ANC gets involved with this stuff. It's about destroying property values and then buying them up at bargain basement rates. So you get this kind of, all over the world, you see the same pattern repeating itself, where people who have interests. We live in a chronic inflation. We live in an era of chronic inflation. If you want to have sustainable investments, you get your money into farmland and urban real estate. You sink your money into fixed assets. Why do you think they build all of these weird big tower blocks all over the world? Many of them are not even used. They're ways of storing wealth. So why is everyone dumping their money into Bitcoin? Because the Fed is printing dollars by the billions. Money's not worth anything. You stick your money in the bank, it depreciates. So this is everywhere in the world. It's not just in South Africa. It's literally everywhere. And so the thing is to get it happening at just a low enough pace that you can keep surviving and making money out of the fluid degradation of the middle class. But it's unsustainable, and it's basically slow motion Mugabenomics everywhere. And what it puts pressure on is it creates incentives for the same things that you see in Zimbabwe and Venezuela. And the end state of the world within a generation's time will be much like Venezuela is now, where you have a tiny core dollarized economy and a vast swathe of starving, violent peasants milling about, attempting to eke a living from between the police state's crumbling edifice. So this is the future that you're going to be looking at, where people living in compounds is literally the only way. There'll be very little between people living in compounds and people living in tin shacks. The ANC has already shifted to a permanent model of housing people in tin shacks, and that will continue forever. And they are currently planning to open the border to the rest of Africa. If you think you're going to survive with your little anchor towns, or you think you've got any more than like a year or two to get Cape independence, I think everyone is deluded. It's now or never. And regardless of whether you want to do it democratically or otherwise, you've got to get it done, because if you don't, it's over. Now you're going to get people like, oh, what's that libertarian guy I keep bickering with online? We had a discussion with him earlier. Ernst, what's his name?
Martin van Staden.
Martin van Staden, there we go. So Martin van Staden reacts with like a little emoji. Yeah, this is. I think he's completely deluded in thinking that there are any benefits to anyone from any ordinary people from opening South Africa's borders. And the thing is, it's not like we have great border control now. But imagine what's going to happen when that free trade agreement sticks the landing, because that's what's going through. That's what Cyril Ramaphosa is busy doing. He's going to sign that free trade agreement. Every African leader is going to announce to their people, you can go to South Africa and they won't deport you. They can do nothing to you. If you think that the 20th century, the late 20th century and the post-apartheid era saw urbanization and shacks growing, you have another thing coming. It's going to be on a scale that you cannot possibly imagine. Cities in South Africa are going to look like Lagos within 10 years.
Okay. But before, I have a question for you as well, Lucas. But Rob, what's the solution? Let's say you get the independent Cape. How do you solve that? Do you build a wall?
Yep. Build a wall, deport people. It's not even.
Put some crocodiles in there for good measure.
No, it's going to be extraordinarily expensive, and it's going to be brutal, and you might not even survive. But if you don't do it, you'll die. It's like, what else is there? What are we talking about? A lot of people want to sit here and sneer and be negative and say, this can't happen. Ha, it'll fail. It's from my perspective. It's look. Whether you're going the AfriForum route or whether you're going the Cape Independence route, you got to be doing something. Okay, you got to be doing something. Even the people who do put South Africa first, those sort of like angry, shouty, nasty people who do certain things to foreigners, they're trying something. They're at least doing something. EFF, they're instruments of power. They're nothing else. The ANC, they're an instrument of international capital and of the United Nations, and they don't really have any principles aside from that. The land reform policy is an extension of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are designed to liquefy property and leave it for international speculation by global consortiums. And if you ask any farmer, they'll tell you how monopolized the sort of feedstock industry is, how monopolized the equipment industries are. Everything is getting consolidated really, really aggressively. And so the world that we're going to be living in that is just it's going to be extremely brutal. And the reaction that you're going to have to it is going to be one that you've articulated many times, Arends. You've said you've got to say, well, what are you willing to live with? What are you willing to sacrifice?
Yes. Yeah, well, that's going to be your philosophy.
Yeah, Wynand Brits says that I am delusional, which it's. He's happy. He's welcome to think so, but regardless of whether you attribute these things to the conspiracy or structural economic interests, one way or the other, they're happening. These effects, and the thing is, anytime so far, my problem has actually been that I've been far too optimistic. I've usually expected things to go really terribly. I remember a while ago, and there's a Dutch friend of mine who made fun of me for this. This is where I made a very bad prediction. So I predicted that after Brexit there would be a bit of an economic shock, and that the election would go to Jeremy Corbyn. But stunningly enough, up came Boris Johnson, and everything turned around very quickly. And yet, bizarrely enough, Boris Johnson has enacted almost all of Jeremy Corbyn's platform. Almost all of it. With the exception of repossessing 10% of all companies. So that one didn't go down well with international capital, and they punished him brutally for it. Labour has now purged everyone related to Jeremy Corbyn, and whenever him and his brother go out to do protests, they get arrested and have £10,000 fines slapped on them. So, you don't screw around with global capital. They'll smack you.
That's the thing. Lucas, to get back to a previous, not a question, but a previous theme that me and Rob talked about, I'd like your thoughts on, is that approach. I mean, Rob's longer answer actually relates to this question. And it's that, how do you approach this type of bold idea? That's one of the things I tweeted out this week, fortune favors the bold. But how, from your perspective, how are you as an activist for this cause? How are you approaching the cause of Cape independence? Are you full steam ahead, no negative thoughts, absolute optimism or die? Or is there a bit more nuance there? Can you give us a bit of an unpacking of that?
Yeah, for me personally, a lot of people might see so much positivity when it comes to the independent Cape and the future of it, but at the end of the day, like that's the last hope that I honestly have for Southern Africa, like for South Africa even. I've no hope, no faith at all that any of South Africa except the Western Cape has any like prosperous future. Phil Craig told me, and I think we can all go and it'll be good for everyone to go and see the IEC results. If you take the Western Cape out of the equation, the rest of South Africa votes almost 3/4 for ANC and EFF. At the end of the day, I wouldn't know whether that's if it's culture or what, but at the end of the day, these people want something, and the leftists in many ways also like they pity them, or they think, oh, the people don't want to live in shacks, they don't want to have the freedoms taken away, they don't want this, but they're just projecting their own cultural wants and needs and opinions upon these other people who vote ANC and EFF. I don't know if they want what the liberals think they want. And up until now, the Western Cape itself is majority capitalistic, whereas the rest of South Africa is majority socialistic. So
I wouldn't make that generalization. Because
that's what the
ordinary
IRR says.
The ordinary person makes money through sort of like micro entrepreneurship. Lots of small bit. What's that? Casinomics. GG Alcott's vibes.
Yeah. Oh, when it comes to I would just say, like, if the Cape doesn't secede, I don't see any good future for the rest of Southern Africa. I mean, in a long-term way, 5 years doesn't matter. Like, that doesn't matter that much to me. But are we gonna live in a better country in 25 years? Not South Africa, I can promise you. If the Cape secedes, we could live in a worse place or the same place, or potentially, definitely, there is a chance of living in a much better country with growing prosperity, with things that we can be proud of, with a better year than the one you had before. And a lot of this is like consistent with what Rob says. I have a very like a growingly like anti-globalist opinion when it comes to governance and ideas for the independent Cape. From libertarianism as well, like there's a lot of appeal in that, but the most important one for me is decentralization. Because of the diverse nature of the Cape, it would be absolutely stupid to put us back into a centralized unitary state. I don't see how anyone can rationally think that would be like good for long-term stability. Economically wise, decentralization would lead to more stability as well. So either like piece by piece, I've researched and had my opinions formed, and I believe like what a lot of the Cape independence movements are pushing for, or Cape independence groups are pushing for, is this more decentralized system. And I believe that's the only system that can work in Southern Africa. We should have had a federal or even more decentralized system from the start from CODESA. But at the end of the day, who was negotiating that? To centralizing parties, and the rest were ignored.
Well, I mean, this is the legacy has been left by Jan Smuts as South Africa's centralized system. In fact, actually, what you saw in the new South Africa is actually more devolution than we saw before. There's a lot of power at the municipal level relative to most places in the world. And especially since the court case on Kolobeni, which forces developers to get consent from the local communities. So there's actually a lot of power at the municipal level in South Africa if people understood what they had available to them. And it's not like people aren't grabbing this power when they realize they can. I mean, you can look at Harry Smith, how much they've gone out of their way to force their government to accept development on their own. Yes, Jan Smuts was a globalist. In fact, he was really weird. As I discussed on my own channel, he was actually a vitalist who believed that the entire nature of the universe tended towards the creation of a single synthetic organism with common consciousness, and that the highest form of holistic evolution was some form of the League of Nations in synthesis with the global capital economy. So basically what we have now. But sorry, I just wanted to say hi to Renier Swallenpoel there while he's in the chat. A lot of the localizing things, I think a lot of South Africa agrees that it's a good idea, and you can see this in Zululand as well. The Zulu King and a lot of the chiefs in the area are aiming at producing local sort of police reservists who are loyal to them. And there are a lot of maneuvers in that part of the country which are tending towards localization of control and so on and so forth, especially now that the NECs are targeting the Ngonyama Trust. They're trying to destabilize. They're trying to consolidate control of KZN, and I mean this has been a target of the ANC since a long time, because they considered the traditional authorities to be colluders with colonial power. And they are, of course, also Jacobins, which means they are radical Republicans, radical sort of homogenous government type people. Everything must be rationalized, centralized, and homogenized. And so there is a big movement against that. And right now you're starting to see realignment of Jacob Zuma with Zulu nationalism and local patronage networks in KZN. The sabotage of the trucking industry is related to this power struggle. And so, but on both fronts, both the sort of like lawfare, devolution stuff that you're seeing in the Cape and the violent gang style and security-oriented patronage networks that you find in KZN, you're seeing a lot of people move towards localization. Unfortunately, most of the rest of the country doesn't have an option, and you're seeing things devolve into chaos in many parts of the country. The thing is, the globalist idea, one has to be cautious about, one has to be delicate about this, because while there are various little conspiracies, well, I say little, they're quite massive in scope. But while there are various little conspiracies around, there are consistent interests. There are persistent interests that sort of recur over time. And if you're in certain industries, particularly if you're in finance, or if you're in real estate development, or if you're in global agriculture or so on, those are permanent interests. And so there's a reason that one of the least funded schools of economic thought is the thought of Ludwig von Mises, because this is the thing: is Marxism has its uses. When you had the Soviet Union come to power, they liquidized the middle class. They gave international capital a captive market that they could sell commodities to. And you see the same with Venezuela. It's a captive market that big countries like Russia and China can sell various things to. And I mean, if you believe Anthony Sutton, although I won't doubt that some of his research is under contention, he made a big study of how many Wall Street firms were backing armament developments up to and including the the nuclear program of the Soviet Union, and the first 5-year plans. And if you listen to, I listened to this morning an account of a young man who went to work in Magnitogorsk back in the 1930s, who was talking about American foremen coming and instructing people on the ground level over there who are contracted from places like Ford and General Electric. So the synthesis between capital and socialism is actually it's quite a sharp one, and the phrase "useful idiots" is one that you ought to bear in mind quite a lot. Is that the left they're always instruments of power. They have been since year dot. And you'll notice that whether you're talking about economic leftists or woke leftists, the woke leftists hold up the managerial society, and they prevent unionization by fracturing the ethnic and identity sort of cohesion of the working class. The economic left break the middle class through progressive income taxes and profligate spending and welfare redistribution. So, and of course, then they create this sort of like parasitic lumpen sort of client class, which in South Africa we've seen balloon to extraordinary points, where it's more than twice the size of the tax-paying population. And so, but this is going to keep going, much like it has in Zimbabwe. It goes down, goes down, goes down. And it's not going to look the same, because Zimbabwe has a different political structure. We have a more heterogeneous and localized structure. But, you know, there are similar rules that apply, and there are similar dynamics that apply in the market. And so, you know, we either do something or we just watch everything keep getting worse and worse and worse. And,
so there were two comments here from the chat that I wanted to address. The first one I'm just going to address briefly. I don't think it's I think it has a very simple answer. So Renish Wanapur asks, what motivates Pretoria to prevent an independent Cape? Why not allow a successful neighbor trade partner? Why their resistance? Well, then you just have to go look at the amount of tax rands that are sent to Pretoria from the Western Cape and how much they get back. And also in power dynamics in regards to the amount of land that they're going to lose control over, the surface area that they're going to lose control over, the population that they're going to lose control over. Pretoria is not interested in decentralization or giving up any form of power. They don't care about trade partners and having nice business and making a profit in that regard. But yeah, that's just, I want to quickly address that. There was a very good question at the very beginning of the stream, but I can't find it now in chat because chat kind of cuts off before we get to it. But Sideliner Opinions asked, or not asked, he said that if the Cape were to achieve independence, the worst thing that would, or it shouldn't just be another South Africa, but with or that it will be clean and it will be non-corrupt and it will be run better. That's, according to him, a recipe for disaster, or just kicking the can down the road. Lucas, your thoughts first on that sentiment, and then you, Rob.
Yeah, if when the Cape secedes, it has the same system as South Africa, I'll just change from a Cape independent supporter to a something else independent supporter, because that's not going to last long. I'd rather than go for an independent Stellenbosch or Langebaan or George or whatever, because at the end of the day, how long do you have to have the same system and it's not working and still keep on keeping the same system? It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Like the most, like we can see what is a success, and we can see what is not a success. Oh yeah, well that's true, and they don't care about the citizens. The ANC cares about them like themselves. That's at the end of the day what we have to deal with. That's something that I've been struggling with a lot of these, like I call them leftists, but they're like disparate groups of people. They support this thing or they support that thing, but at the end of the day, they don't understand the telos or the reason or the goal, the end goal. Is your end goal really to help the people? Do you really care about these people, or do you only care about feeling good, or do you only care about doing the politically correct thing? Because at the end of the day, like, we know what is scientifically and evidence-based, like the best form of government for these situations, or the best policy for this situation. And keeping this in a centralized system that's a fuck up. It's not going to work. The majority, the biggest group, will oppress the rest if we are in a unitary state again. And I don't want to be trapped in that.
Yeah.
Rob, your thoughts on that sentiment of just having South Africa, but we're doing it right this time?
Look, I mean, we have to face reality. It's not going to be. It's not going to be we're not going to have a state where we can blend everyone together. And I think we've at least recognized that we can't stick all the cultures in a blender and hope everyone comes out one color. We're going to have to cope with the sort of complex and often contentious coalitions that emerge, and we know that that there are tensions waiting to be expressed in the Cape that could be very violent. We know that. I don't think there's anyone who denies it. I mean, the disappearance of whatever goes on in Pretoria unleashes a lot of things. But I mean, the Cape is different. It has a different institutional culture. I mean, like, if it's not going to be a democracy, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't think anyone does, and I think that it's a gamble. You're throwing the dice here. Jack Miller talking about canton style like Switzerland. That was thrown out during Codesa. That was thrown out as an option. The other one that they had was something called consociationalism, where you'd have each ethnic group voting as a bloc, and then they'd have veto power on all the other blocks. I mean, can you imagine that settlement coming, where you have white elections and black elections and colored elections and Indian elections, and each have their own parties, and if one of the blocks says "fuck you," then the other parties go, okay, well, what are we going to do now? Can you imagine that? It's like the European Union without territorial control. It's complete. It's nutbag stuff. So look, people are going to try things, and they're going to get a lot of shit wrong, and it's going to be unsatisfying for pretty much everyone. That's because it's politics. And the thing is, see now, Vaynant Brits is now asking the important question: are you willing to go for war for this idea?
Maybe finish your thought first, and then we can get to that question.
Okay. Well, the thing is that Lucas brought up the problem of leftists. This is actually a very important problem. The Cape is full of left-wing people, particularly amongst the white elite, and like it or not, white people are the elite in the Cape. They dominate the intellectual sphere. They dominate the managerial classes, right? And so that culture is going to be the one that is going to be wielding the most power, and it is filled to the brim with noxious leftists. Okay, so we have to acknowledge that a lot of this there are going to be a lot of ugly things. There's a pervasive idea. Now, a lot of people are. The idea of egalitarianism, sort of an economic egalitarianism, the idea of leveling the playing field and closing the gap and all of this kind of stuff, regardless of whether you use an economic or racial or gender-based paradigm. This leveling instinct is very, very, very potent, particularly in Cape Town. And the thing is that the crisis that we're facing is too short term to talk about building up any other kind of competing elite from oh, don't worry, Rob, we'll sort out those lefties in Noordhoek. No, you won't. You're going to have to realize how dire the situation is, and realize that it's going to be very messy, and that if they don't flee, they're going to stick around and cause shit. And
they're gonna metaphorically put sugar in your engine, in your petrol.
They're gonna put sugar in your engine, and I mean, you're gonna have the same. Look, before anyone from the AfriForum crowd gets too smug, I would point out that the Anchortown problem faces a similar issue, but a similar threat but from a completely different dynamic. So there's never going to be a point where you get like proper self-beskikking. You're always going to be dependent on African labor, and that African labor is going to continue to dwarf you, and it's going to continue to become more and more economically interdependent on you, and then it's going to make demands, and you're not going to be able to meet the demands, and the cycle will continue as it has for the past couple hundred years. And so we're all in the same boat here, whether we go for one solution or the other, which is that whether it comes from an economic motivation or a sort of class political motivation, you're going to have to constantly be sweeping leaves against the wind to maintain any sort of degree of stability of capital ownership, any sort of stability of community cohesion. All of these things are going to be, as the man said, sweeping leaves on a windy day. So don't let anyone tell you that their solution is magic. It's what you've got, and go with it. Go with whatever your heart fucking tells you is the right answer. I'm behind all of these efforts. I'm 100% behind whatever is helping to sort of suck power away from. I'm available on Tuesdays after work. No, so but I think, look, I'm behind the Zulus 100%. I'm behind AfriForum. I'm even behind the nasty. I'm even behind some of the sort of dangerous sounding stuff coming from Put South Africa First to some extent, within reasonable boundaries. For the main point that we have to be pushing back against what's being imposed on us from without, and people are going to make a big deal out of trying to build narratives of like friend-enemy distinction along race lines, and I don't buy that. I think, look, if the real distinction between who your friends and enemies are in this system is not along race lines at all. It's not along religious lines. It's really about, you got to see it as a network. Are you serving international capital, or are you serving the local people? And that's about it.
This is a very interesting thought here from Sideline Opinions. He says the more relatively successful the independent Cape will become, the higher they will have to build the wall.
Well, I mean, these people are not going to climb over the flipping mountains. They're not going to walk through the Karoo Desert. Okay, they're select areas that you'll have to defend, and then there are a few highways and rail links in, and so the Cape can defend itself fairly well. The Cape's actually quite. So I don't think people need
best.
That. It's about enforcing. It's about enforcing it's about enforcing rule of law within the Cape that's going to be difficult. One of the biggest obstacles that you face is obviously that the ANC has a patronage network connected to the Cape gangs. They have a patronage network connected to extortion rackets and shack farming. And so these violent criminal dominance strategies are going to be a real problem, because there are vested economic interests in the black market which are completely orthogonal to our interests, not only in terms of these gangs as we see them now, but a growing market for international drug shipments. South Africa, Cape Town processes roughly a quarter of all narcotics that enter the European Union, never mind anywhere else. So this is, you're facing off against these very, very big, scary beasts, and we have to remember what it's Patrick Vianello, little armchair general. I mean, don't take me wrong, I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying that comment. I think that's fucking great.
I just mentioned
Yep. Go for it.
Yeah, just two, and it's different points. Like, firstly, on the gangs, like there's not going to be a quick fix. I mean, you're not going to go in like they tried with Brazil with like a massive force, have bloodshot like all through the. But there is like a different, longer term way to deal with the gangs. It can be multiple different routes at once, but that's something for another day. For these people chunking about independence and it's never going to happen, and South Africa, and what. Like, there's three things. Just think about these three things now. We're going into, in the next 10 years, we're going to go into debt spiral, like a sovereign debt crisis. And unless you wanna tell me what you're gonna do when the social security grants and stuff run out, unless you're gonna tell me what's gonna happen when the NHI comes, when we lose even more like skilled and productive people to brain drain, unless you're going to tell me what's going to happen when we have capital flight and nothing left of South Africa. Then why don't you do something about it? There's the black poll, which I think some skeptics have, and it's just this won't work, that won't work, that won't work. But what are you actually doing then? Like, are you gonna just like hop at every single solution someone is trying to go after? That's something I see with a lot of people. They are very anti-DA as well, very anti-opposition. And what are these people actually succeeding in except keeping the ANC strong and in power? At the end of the day, if that's what you're doing, you need to reevaluate your approach to working on your future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone's got watched a lot of ETV back in the 90s and the 2000s, but there was this shitty movie that would be on fairly frequently called Jack Frost. It's a sort of like nasty little Christmas movie where the guys, this kid's, this kid's father gets killed and he gets reincarnated as a snowman on Christmas, and it's really stupid. But I remember at the end of the film, this bully who's been fairly ruthlessly picking on him for his whole life in this town that he's living in, comes across him trying to save his dad from melting as the spring sunshine comes out. And he decides to be a bit of a human being because because the kid just he just goes, just please help me, this is my dad. And he goes, well, and then the guy goes, well, snow dad's better than no dad. And that, as far as I'm concerned, that's the attitude you've got to kind of have with some of these sort of political options, whether you go with anchor towns or whether you go with Cape Independence, whether you go with Zulu nationalism, whether you go with Greater Botswana, whatever the hell's going on, whether you're going for a conservative sort of conservative black nationalism or whatever the hell you're doing, do something. Pick something that's better than this, for God's sake. Yes. Snow. Or you've got nothing.
Yeah.
And people won't be able to leave. We're sitting here as educated intellectuals who can afford to live overseas because we're going to get a job or whatever, and I look at the situation and I think to myself, well, the least we can do is try and add to the conversation and try and help people make sense. This is the very least we can do. What we're doing now is the absolute bare minimum that we're supposed to be doing as people who've got an education in this country. So, pick a fucking horse and back it, Don't be a pussy, don't sit on the fence, just pick something and argue for it. And there, link arms when you can, because this whole thing that you see with Cape Independence, you think the Vryheidsfront Plus and the Cape Party want the same thing? Do you think they have the same cultural base? Do you think that they want the same thing as the Cape Coloured Congress? No, they have shared interests for now, and these shared interests are good things. And don't make enemies out of people just because they disagree with you. Okay, if you share existential interests with a group, whatever their persuasion, fucking make friends, get over your shit.
Before we get to final thoughts, there's just a comment here that's so pertinent, and it's Lars's comment that says, and this is something I've echoed as well on this channel and on my Twitter: if you vote for a party just because they are the opposition, then you are creating the next problem. Rather suffer longer and get the right solution. Don't kick the can down the road for your kids. It's not exactly my thoughts, but in the same vein, where I think the bigger, and this is a completely different conversation for another day, but I want to address this. The biggest mistake you can make in regards to Cape Independence and in terms of, let's say, replacing the ANC, just for hypothetical sake, is not replacing it the right way or not doing it the right way. In regards to, for example, voting in a party that's just the ANC light, that's just going to be as soon as that party is
okay. That's no good. Look, I'm going to go with this one. So look, the perfect is the enemy of the good. I stick by that 100%. But there's something to be said for this observation that you don't vote for a watered down version of the shitness that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But what you do is you decide what the defining issue is. You decide what that defining issue is. And for me, that's the National Democratic Revolution. You look at that. That thing is a comprehensive set of policies. It is racial discrimination. It is violation of property rights. It is mass wealth redistribution, and it's complete state centralization. And so these things together, that forms the National Democratic Revolution. And anyone who's opposed to all of that shit, you back them 100%, regardless of who they are, and you show some goddamn loyalty because people's lives are on the line here.
Yeah,
and
but when you take into account a party, for example, that you can clearly see as soon as they feel the slightest bit of pressure or heat from their supporters that they will back EWC or expropriation without compensation, that's not a solution. And I see a lot of that type of thinking in South Africa, where if we can just get rid of the ANC, it doesn't matter what we replace them with. Trust me, you can replace them with, firstly, a much more evil party, or you can replace them with a party that's pretty much just all lip service. Right. As soon as they are under pressure, they're just going to revert to exactly the same populist promises as the ANC. All you've done is you've bought yourself some time, and as Lars said here, you just kicked the can down the road for your kids and your grandkids.
But I want to make a point here. So when that phrase "kick the can down the road" has enormous historical significance in South Africa. The reason for that, and this is why his point touches very complex issues. So when Jan Smuts got what he wanted when he designed South Africa, he got the absolute answer that he wanted. Okay, he got a unitary government, and he got a government which included the whole territory and designed it with a combination of British trusteeship and gradual integration. So instead of seeking a complete separation of black and white into different countries, he preserved a sort of special economic pattern, which borrowed people from all over the British Empire, and it led to the South Africa we have today, that was inevitably going to become what is now called the Rainbow Nation. Smuts designed the Rainbow Nation. He really did. He designed the United Nation, the values of the United Nations that ended up designing the constitution that we ended up in 1996. Jan Smuts designed the whole thing. Everything is his brainchild. If you read his book Holism and Evolution, if you read or any of his comments made at any major political settlement, that's the issue. But when he got a few decades into governing this system, he realized that it was unsustainable. He realized that the coping mechanisms that he was forced to institute to control the racial influx into the urban centers, the segregation that he had to institute in order to keep the whites from rebelling and overthrowing the government, okay, this had created an unsustainable situation that our generation is now paying for. And he said, and he has kicked the can down the road. And he actually said so in his own words in his comments on the Fabian reports. So what we're looking at here is it's not that, oh, you kick the can down the road or you get what you want. Sometimes getting what you want is stupid, because there's no formulaic answer that you're going to arrive at. People are doing their best. You've got different people with different interests, and you're going to have to deal with them, because at the end of the day, politics is horse trading. The reason we ended up with apartheid was because of negotiations for keeping control of power. Can you imagine trying to do non-racialism back in 1920, whatever? You just simply couldn't. Any government that tried to do that would be gone. There'd be a coup the next day. It wouldn't work. And so you have to realize that politics is, again, the art of the possible, and you have to do what you have to do with, or deal with what's within the realm of the possible, and go for the best option within the tolerable spectrum of things. There's shit that you have to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this is intolerable under no circumstances, fuck off and die. But beyond that, you have to make deals. So National Democratic Revolution, anyone who supports it is an implacable enemy that you do not deal with under any circumstances, because it's an existential issue. Okay, but anyone else, you talk to them, even if they like seem kind of left-ish, like oh yeah, no, I didn't call. Sorry, Kat. I didn't call Naomi Klein a Scrooge. I called her a stooge. I said that she is. She didn't. She refused to acknowledge the existence of the Great Reset, and so as a result, I think that she is a stooge of the financial interests that back the organization she works in. That's a different question, but that's a whole other story for another day.
Yeah, no, Rob, very good points that you made there. Maybe now, I think we're going to have another discussion in the future. I want both of you on definitely as guests again. But before that, I think we can just end off tonight's discussion with some final thoughts to get back to specifically the topic of Cape independence.
Sorry.
That's all right, Rob. We didn't lose viewers; we actually gained them. So you weren't talking people today. Lucas, your final thoughts on not only the march that happened over the weekend, but also for the future of the movement.
Yeah, so this has been the first official Cape Independence March, and I think it would be hard to say that it wasn't very successful. And in the next year, like, there's just going to be more and more and more of them, and hopefully, fingers crossed, each time it'll be bigger and bigger and better, and make a better impact. Awareness is going to grow, and people are going to start being confronted with this idea. Do they like it based on the arguments, merits, and their own dreams about it or not? And at the end of the day, give it enough time, and everyone will have heard about it, and most people will have made up their minds, and then we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, it's not going to be a group of fanatics that bring about independence. It's going to be because the majority of the people in the Western Cape want it, and if they don't, then this is, or as some people say, a pipe dream. So yeah, that's my thought on it. Hopefully, every time we put in the same or even more effort, and that's our charge. That's part of this cause.
Absolutely, Rob. Your final thoughts? Same type of question.
Prospects very slim. Chances very slim. The chances at the moment, the chances are very slim for any escape from this avalanche of bullshit that we're living under as South Africans. The chances of escaping, global United Nations woke capital for anywhere in the world, very slim. But if you don't fight against it, your children will be slaves. Your children will starve. Your children will live in, violent, destitute circumstances with no hope of appeal to a society that cares about them. And you have to do something about that, even if it's just like making silly videos online, And I mean, like I say that dismissively because in my mind, I always feel like I'm doing too little. I always feel like I'm putting in way too little effort. But, this is an information war, going out and doing research and helping people understand what's going on, putting information out there, whatever it is, helping people make sense of, morality and government and economics and anything is, do it. It's good. Do something.
Remember to be wholesome. Yeah, no, well, thank you very much to both of you for coming on. My final thoughts would just be my thoughts that I put out there this week, and that is that fortune favors the bold, but maybe not boldness as many understand it, but genuine boldness in a historic sense. And I think the determining question, as I have repeatedly said, in regards to Cape independence is going to be a question of not what you want and what you want to gain, but what you are willing to give up. So something to think about. So thank you very much to both of you for your valuable time. Thank you for an excellent discussion. I enjoyed it a lot. You can find links to both Rob's channel and his Twitter, and also Lucas's Twitter in the description. Go give them a follow, give them a subscribe. go check out their content. I'm a fan of both of them. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you also to everyone that tuned in and for taking part in the live chat. Always enjoy your input. There was some very bantery remarks here that I thoroughly enjoyed, but also some serious questions and sentiments that I also appreciated. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope to see you on the next episode. Cheers, guys. God bless.
Cool.
Good night.
Thanks. Bye.